The dust in Willow Creek doesn't just settle, it buries you. Elena stood in the middle of a barren dirt yard, her $2,000 silk wedding dress, the last relic of her former life, trailing through the grime. There was no champagne, there were no bridesmaids, there was only the smell of manure, the sound of a dying tractor, and the man standing in front of her. Elias. He was wearing a faded flannel shirt with holes in the elbows and boots caked in layers of mud. He looked less like a husband and more like a man who hadn't seen a bank account with more than 3 digits in a decade. "It's not much," Elias said, his voice like gravel. "But it's yours now. All of it." Elena looked at the sagging porch of the farmhouse. She looked at her father's desperate face in the car window as he drove away, knowing that her sacrifice had just cleared the $3 million debt that was about to send him to federal prison. She had traded her freedom for a man who farmed rocks in a town that didn't even appear on GPS. But as she stepped onto that rotting porch, Elena didn't see the rust. She didn't see the poverty. She saw a prison sentence she'd signed herself into. What she didn't know, what nobody in the entire state of Montana knew, was that the man holding the door open for her wasn't just a farmer. And the dirt beneath his fingernails, it was worth more than every skyscraper in Manhattan. 6 months ago, Elena was the it girl of Chicago's high society. Her life was a blur of gala invites, black tie benefits, and rooftop cocktails. Then the bottom fell out. Her father, a real estate mogul, hadn't just made bad investments, he'd been played. A rival firm had systematically dismantled his empire, leaving him with a mountain of debt and a target on his back. The deal came from an anonymous intermediary. A private landholder in the rural Northwest offered to clear the debt in exchange for a marriage alliance. It sounded medieval. It sounded insane. But when the handcuffs are clicking, you don't argue with the key. Now, Elena's life was a cycle of 4 a.m. wake-up calls and the blistering heat of the fields. Elias was a ghost of a man. He spoke in sentences of 5 words or less. He spent 18 hours a day out on the back 40, a massive fenced-off stretch of land that he forbade her from entering. "Stay away from the North Ridge, Elena," he warned her every morning. "The soil is unstable. It's dangerous." Elena assumed he was just embarrassed. The North Ridge looked like a wasteland, gray, ashy dirt where not even weeds would grow. She spent her days scrubbing floors and learning how to cook over a wood-burning stove, her manicured nails becoming cracked and stained. But as the weeks turned into months, she noticed things that didn't add up. Elias didn't have a phone, yet she'd hear him speaking in low, urgent tones behind the barn late at night. He drove a truck held together by duct tape, yet his medicine cabinet was filled with high-end, specialized serums for chemical burns. And then there were the collectors. Every Tuesday, a black SUV would pull up to the edge of the property. Elias would meet them at the gate, hand over a small, heavy satchel, and the car would vanish. "Is that the harvest?" Elena asked one evening, watching the dust cloud from the SUV disappear. "In a way," Elias replied, not looking at her. "Go inside, Elena. There's a storm coming." The storm wasn't weather. It was the past catching up. One afternoon, while Elias was deep in the North Ridge, a sleek silver Bentley pulled into the muddy driveway. Out stepped Marcus Thorne, the man who had ruined Elena's father. He looked around the dilapidated farm with a sneer of pure disgust. "So this is where the Princess of Chicago ended up," Marcus mocked, stepping over a puddle. "In a pigsty with a peasant." Elena stood her ground, a rusted shovel in her hand. "What do you want, Marcus?" "I want the land," Marcus said, his eyes turning cold. "Your husband is sitting on 30,000 acres of useless dirt. I offered him 5 times the market value last year, and he laughed at me. I figured now that he has a wife with expensive tastes, he might be more reasonable." "He won't sell," Elena said, though she had no idea why. "This is his family's legacy." "Legacy doesn't pay for indoor plumbing, darling," Marcus hissed. "Tell him he has 24 hours to sign the deed over to Thorne Industries, or I'll make sure your father's clear debt finds its way back into the hands of the DA. This farm is a graveyard, Elena. Don't die in it with him. When Elias returned that night, Elena told him everything. She expected him to panic. She expected him to break down. Instead, he did something she had never seen him do. He smiled. It was a cold, razor-sharp expression that didn't belong on a farmer's face. "He wants the North Ridge?" Elias asked, wiping grease from his hands. "He wants to know what's in the dirt?" "Elias, he'll destroy us," Elena pleaded. "We can just run. We can take what's left and go." Elias walked over to her, taking her rough, hard-working hands in his. For the first time, she felt a strange power radiating from him. "Elena, you married me to save your father. Now, I'm going to show you why I let you." The next morning, the silence of the valley was shattered. It started as a low hum, a vibration that rattled the windows of the farmhouse. Marcus Thorne had arrived early, flanked by a legal team and 2 private security guards. "Time's up, Farmer Brown," Marcus shouted from the yard. "Sign the papers or the cops are 5 minutes behind me." Elias stepped out onto the porch, calm and unbothered. He wasn't wearing his flannel today. He was wearing a tactical black jacket, and he held a satellite phone in his hand. "You're trespassing, Marcus," Elias said. "I'm reclaiming an asset," Marcus laughed. "Look at this place. You're a nobody. You're a footnote." Suddenly, the hum turned into a roar. From over the eastern ridge, 3 blacked-out Sikorsky helicopters appeared, staying low to the ground. They didn't have corporate logos. They had government serial numbers.
The wind from the rotors whipped the dirt into a frenzy. Marcus's security guards reached for their holsters, but they froze. From the tree line, a dozen snipers in advanced ghillie suits emerged, red laser dots dancing across Marcus's chest. The helicopters touched down in the useless North Ridge. "What is this?" Marcus screamed over the noise, his face pale. "Who are these people?" A man in a charcoal suit hopped out of the lead chopper and sprinted toward the porch. He didn't stop at Marcus. He went straight to Elias and snapped a crisp salute. "Director Vance," the man said, "the refinement is complete. The first shipment is ready for transport to the Department of Energy. We've confirmed the purity levels, 98%. Elena watched breathless as Elias took a tablet from the man. "Good," Elias said, his voice booming with authority. "And the interloper?" The director glanced at Marcus. "Industrial espionage against a Tier 1 national security site. We have the warrants for his entire board of directors. They're being picked up in Chicago as we speak." Elias walked down the stairs, stepping right into Marcus's personal space. The dirt-poor farmer now looked like the most dangerous man on the planet. "You thought I was farming corn, Marcus?" Elias said softly. "This isn't a farm. This is the only viable lutetium-176 deposit in the Western Hemisphere. It's the core component for the next generation of quantum computing and deep space propulsion. This dirt is worth $400 billion, and you just tried to steal it from the United States government." As the federal agents tackled Marcus into the mud, Elias turned back to Elena. The helicopters were loading heavy, lead-lined crates from the North Ridge. "I needed a wife," Elias said, walking back to her. "The project required me to maintain a deep cover persona to keep the private sector from sniffing around until the extraction tech was ready. Your father's debt was the perfect cover story to bring someone in from the outside without raising eyebrows."
Elena stood on the porch, watching the Bentley being towed away and Marcus being shoved into a helicopter in zip ties. Her life had shifted again, more violently than before. "So, none of it was real?" she asked, her voice trembling. "The debt? The marriage? You just needed a prop?" Elias looked at her. For a moment, the director vanished, and the man who had shared coffee with her at 5 a.m. every morning returned. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, rough stone. It glowed with a faint, ethereal violet light. "The mission is over, Elena," he said. "The site is going fully active. You're free. The debt is paid 10 times over. There's a jet waiting at the county airstrip to take you back to Chicago. You can have your old life back. The galas, the silk dresses, all of it. He handed her the glowing stone. A souvenir, he whispered, for your trouble. Elena looked at the stone, then at the man who had been her husband in the dirt. She looked at her scarred hands. Then she did something that shocked even the director of the most classified project in America. She threw the stone into the mud. I don't want the jet, she said firmly, and I don't want Chicago. Elias blinked. Then what do you want? Elena stepped forward, grabbing his tactical vest and pulling him close. I want to know why a $400 billion under his feet spent 3 hours last Sunday fixing my favorite rocking chair by hand. Elias paused, a genuine warm smile finally breaking across his face. He leaned in, his voice a low vibration against her ear. Because, Elena, the lutetium isn't the most valuable thing I found in this dirt. He kissed her, right there in the middle of the whirlwind and the noise of the rotors. But then, the final twist. As the helicopters lifted off, Elena noticed the director whispering into his comms. She glanced down at the tablet Elias had left on the porch table. It was still logged into the project's main database. She saw her own name. She saw her father's name. But then, she saw the date the marriage alliance was authorized. It wasn't 6 months ago when her father went broke. It was 10 years ago. The ruin of her father hadn't been an accident by Marcus Thorne. It had been a decade-long operation orchestrated by Elias himself. He hadn't saved her family. He had destroyed them, piece by piece, for 10 years, just to ensure that when he finally needed a wife for his cover, she would have nowhere else to go. She looked up at Elias, the man she just kissed, and realized she wasn't his partner. She was his most successful harvest.